Bill, thanks very much. We'll let you get right to it. Involved in these Toyota hearings today, Republican Representative John Shadegg, who's a member of the Energy and Commerce Subcommittee. Also, AutoNation Chairman and CEO Mike Jackson. AutoNation is the world's largest Toyota dealer. Congressman, thank you for joining us today. We know that you're going to have a lot of questions, and the reason for these hearings are to try to get to the bottom of things. But heading into the hearings, based on everything you've either read in the media or everything you've studied from what you've uncovered to this point, do you have some thought before you go into this, some bias before you go in about what happened here?
Well, the bias has to be that we have to be sure the American people are safe. That's the #1 concern. Unfortunately, when Congress gets into these investigations, it's not best, I think, situated to conduct the kind of thorough, in-depth investigation. Often it's political stage show. And in this case, while the government should be looking into it, and certainly if there are investigators like criminal investigators who have reason to go forward, they should be doing that. The question is, will we learn anything in these hearings today, or are they just a political stage show? And the second question comes from the ownership by the federal government of General Motors, now called Government Motors. And is there a bias going on here? Did the Obama administration overreact because they want to somehow stack the deck in favor of domestic producers, in favor of perhaps domestic auto unions, and make a bigger deal out of this than was appropriate? And those
do you think that there's a bigger concern here about safety of people who are driving Toyotas? Are you more concerned that this is a political stage show that is railroading Toyota?
Well, my #1 concern is always going to be safety of the American traveling public. We should be asking Toyota these questions. But the way it's been handled from the get-go, I think Secretary LeBeau went over the top. I don't think it's the job of government officials to scare the public. I think they should conscientiously do their job. And if their agency hasn't handled things well, then investigate their own agency, look at what they could have done better, but don't start off kind of from the get-go, shooting off your mouth, making very, very accusatory remarks before you have enough information to know whether to go forward. And that's particularly true, whereas in this case, the government has a stake. The Obama administration has funded the General Motors and is in a position of saying, well, we want it to succeed.
Congressman, we've talked to other people and asked them very specifically if they're concerned about protecting the domestic automakers. But again, back to some of these safety questions, these are not just questions that have been raised by people in government who are looking into this, but you've got newspapers like the Wall Street Journal that has laid out a front-page story a couple of weeks ago that said Toyota knew about some of the problems with the design of its accelerator for more than a year before it told officials that. Are you concerned about that?
Of course I'm concerned about that. And I had Toyota in, and they've made an explanation of where this began and how it started. I don't think they will contend that they've handled it in a perfect manner.
Do you think they were holding out the truth or not? I mean, you've talked to them behind the scenes, too. Do you think that they knew that there were problems and didn't tell regulators, or are you convinced that that was an innocent mistake?
Well, actually, I think they came forward and told regulators before they were required to under the law. The question is, can government protect people in these circumstances, or is the tort system a better vehicle for investigating this kind of information, getting the experts out in front of it? These are extremely technical questions, and I'm not convinced the Congress is the best venue to at least get to the bottom line answer of whether Toyota knew something that it didn't deal with, whether this question is electronics or whether it is the floor mats, as Toyota contends.
You think the trial lawyers are better people to take this on?
Well, at the end of the day, the system we have in America is a jury. And if indeed there will be lawsuits, which there will be experts, I think that is a pretty good mechanism for finding out who was at fault here, what they knew, and for compensating the people involved. There have been horrific accidents. I think we need to get to the bottom of that.
Okay. Why don't we bring Mike in on this, too? Mike, you're the largest Toyota dealership in the world. Why don't you tell us how things are going along so far with that recall? We've spoken with you recently, but what's your progress at this point?
Well, at the stores, the customers are very calm, and due to an intensive effort by all Toyota dealers across the country to meet their every need, both from a technical point of view and any information that they need, we have retained their goodwill, trust, and confidence in Toyota. So that's quite an achievement. We've also have enough parts that we've repaired all the inventory, and production has resumed. So we're just about to resume normal sales going into March. We have told Toyota, though, that many customers feel under the circumstances some sort of gesture is needed, some sort of incentive, some sort of assurance program. And I think until Toyota addresses that issue, we're going to have a little bit of a standoff here. So my message to Toyota, has been quite clear that, considering the circumstances, they need to make a gesture. You know, the American people are very understanding and forgiving and willing to go forward, but they would like a gesture.
A gesture in the form of cash compensation, or a gesture in the form of
I'm talking about some sort of incentive to restart sales, and that can be some sort of maintenance program, warranty program, some other sort of incentive. All that's being discussed, but I think in the circumstance it's needed, and I've communicated that to Toyota.
Yeah, you know, actually, I want to go back to what the Congressman just said a few minutes earlier. Congressman, don't you think that America and the American people expect our government to protect us from inferior products or products that aren't safe? You know, this reminds me in a number of ways that back when Ford Motor Company had the Pinto issue, where a design change would have saved a lot of lives, and they actually did a calculation as to how much it would cost to settle lawsuits when people died versus, or got injured, versus making a change in the vehicle itself. And it took years for that to go to the trial system. We don't have, when American lives are at stake, I don't think we need to be relying on the trial lawyers to protect us. Aren't we electing you and your representatives in this government to protect us from dangerous products?
By all means, and that's why these hearings are going forward, and that's why the recalls have occurred, and that's why we should be asking these questions and getting this information to the fore, and Toyota has begun the system. Now, if we need to probe deeper into that, which is what these hearings are about, to find out if Toyota is doing enough, that's absolutely appropriate. All I'm saying is, unfortunately in this circumstance, because the government now owns an automobile company, there are questions about whether at least some, not necessarily the Congress, but maybe some in the Congress, not necessarily all of the administration, are handling this in the fashion they should. I think it creates a bias. Yes, that is the job of the government, is to ensure safety under these circumstances, but we should be able to trust the government under these circumstances and make sure that somebody isn't stacking the deck in one direction or the other. And I think your point is exactly right. The government should be the unbiased arbiter in these circumstances. Its first duty should be the safety of the American people. It should be able to be aggressive in doing that, and it should not be suspect because it happens to own an automobile company.
Well, I don't think it's, I guess, so what you're saying is you have a concern that your colleagues or that the President of the United States would be advocating a regulatory action against Toyota for unsafe products in order to enhance General Motors' standing? Are you really saying that?
You look at the members of Congress that have made the most out of this. You look at Mr. Hood's original remarks. You look at the way this has been handled compared to other auto recalls or safety recalls, and I think there's reason to have those questions, absolutely.
Don, this is Mike Jackson. You know, I fully agree with you that the hearings are appropriate, but we've all seen how this town can behave sometime, and the reason I'm here for discussions is say, okay, the hearings are appropriate, but let's not have this spin out of control into a political witch hunt or something else. And I think we've all seen that happen in this town. So professional, measured, fair hearings that we can all learn from for the future, absolutely.
Although the taxpayers do have a lot of money on the line here, and you know, I mean, GM's been down and out for years, and I mean, would it be that? I mean, it'd be nice to sell a few domestic.
Yeah. And the people need to have confidence in what the government is doing.
And I think they do. And by the way, it's up to you, Congressman, and your colleagues to give us the confidence in our system. And I will say this. Look, I think that Washington and our Congress actually has become far too reactionary, in my opinion. It jumps into every issue of the day that comes out in the media. So
you're making my point.
Your authority needs to be done, you know, with some responsibility and some care and recognition of that. But also, at the same hand, there needs to be consequences, not gestures, by the way. Consequences when there's an intentional deployment of vehicles and products in our market system that the manufacturers know are unsafe. And if that's the case, then there should be great consequences. If it's not the case and they made a mistake, then it should be corrected and we move on.
I think that's exactly right. It needs to be professionally handled by the Congress. And if, in fact, there was an intentional deployment of unsafe cars, then there needs to be very severe consequences. That's what we ought to be finding out in these hearings, and that's why they need to be professional and unbiased, and they need to get into the depth of this issue.
I mean, there's some Schadenfreude here, too, because Toyota has eaten the lunch of the domestic automakers for years and years based on quality, and now all of a sudden we find out that maybe they weren't the quality wasn't quite as high, and maybe the company wasn't even forthcoming. I mean, the New York Times had a piece that said, when the A student flunks, oh, what a feeling. I mean, there is some schadenfreude here as well.
And, Joe, let me give you an example. Here you have this committee making these charges around that it's electronics. When the industry, the total industry, has looked at the electronics inside and out, and this is both for the aircraft industry and the automotive industry, and they're all designed with fail-safe systems, and it's one of the most reliable, dependable systems, and there's never been a single case with any manufacturer around electronics and unattended acceleration. So to make some of the charges that are being thrown at Toyota.
What about now, Mike, with the hybrids? What about the way isn't there some question of the electronics for the brakes?
It has a sophisticated braking system where they're updating the software to change the feel.
Well, it can't be the floor mat, Mike. It's not the floor mat getting stuck with the pedal,
for
is
the
it?
customer.
As
far as the recall, the floor mat sticking under the pedal is absolutely an issue. People put floor mats on top of floor mats. And there wasn't enough clearance when you do that. So
yeah, but one of the people, they pulled their car out of the lake and they found the floor mats in the trunk. I mean, there's
but
other
no one has
questions
determined whether that was
exist.
floor mats or something else.
Well, it wasn't the floor
case.
mats because they were in the trunk.
Well, no one has determined whether that was driver error or something else.
Right, and it sounds to me today like Akio Toyoda, in his statement and his commentary in the Wall Street Journal, is saying that it could be operator error. They weren't aware of how some people and some operators were using their vehicles. I think the bottom line remains that there are questions that are still out there,
and the hearings are appropriate.
And we would like to see Congress get to some of these answers in a reasoned manner, but we would all like to see the answers come out. So, Congressman, thank you very much for joining us. Mike, thank you very much for joining us. And we really appreciate your time today, guys.
Glad to be with you.
Thanks.
Any comments or questions on any of that stuff, we'd love to hear from you. See what you think. Our address is